As people of the way, we are told to be in the world, but not of the world. To be in the world, but not of the world. Now, there's a lot of layers to this statement, to be in the world, but not of the world, and a lot of different ways that this statement can be interpreted. But today, we're going to take it from a very specific lens. And we're going to look at this as a dimensional concept. To be in the world, meaning to understand, to accept, to view the world of the 3D, to allow ourselves to be fully present in the world of the 3D, the world that is sensory, that is perceived by our senses, but to be not of the world, meaning to accept from a dimensional perspective that there are other greater dimensional perspectives on reality. So to be in the world, living in the 3D, but not of the world, understanding that our source is dimensionally greater. Here at Sunday Mystery School, we're going through Neville Goddard's original Masterclass, his original Mystery School Masterclass, the 1948 lessons. And we're currently on lesson 5, which is remain faithful to your ideal or remain faithful to your idea. Okay? And he's talking about really this process of splitting apart our awareness and understanding that we have within our human perspective really two minds. The carnal mind, which is this being in the world, it's the evidence of the senses, it's the 3D material reality, and the fourth dimensional mind, which is the mind of Christ. It's a dimensionally greater realm, and it's also a perspective on reality that transcends time. Actually allows, when we begin to think this way, it allows us to lift our awareness above the dark realm of the senses and actually begin to transcend time. Now, you could look at this as the idea of time travel, using your imagination or using your mental faculties. But really, it's not so much traveling in time. That's what we do in the 3D. We travel in time. Really, it's transcending beyond time to a field that where time is now observed from outside of its realm. We can actually perceive past, the present, the future as a present whole, meaning we can see it from outside of time. We're not in it, moving from the past through the present to the future, or at least that's what it feels like we're doing. We can actually lift our awareness to a higher dimensional perspective, and we can view time from outside the 3D. And that is, through this perspective, that's what's being referred to with this command to be in the world, but not of the world. It's a command to begin to develop higher dimensional faculties of thinking. And this is, of course, the mystic path. The mystic path does not accept the world simply at the level of the 3D, but rather, someone who is walking the mystic path is cultivating these higher dimensional realms of perception, actively cultivating them. And of course, this masterclass, originally taught by Neville Goddard and being modernized and expanded in this space, is all about learning how to cultivate those higher dimensional states of awareness. Now, doing this, although it may seem abstract on the surface, there's always a practical application for anything that we're doing that is a spiritual practice. I mean, Neville taught, and we here at Sunday Mystery School agree with the idea that that which is most spiritual is actually also most practical, and that really any spiritual practice should directly impact, influence, and enhance our quality of life in the realm of the practical. Okay, so our goal here is not simply to think about this idea of raising our perception to higher dimensional planes simply is abstract, but really to understand how that can meaningfully impact and enhance our quality of life. Okay? So we're going to continue with the text. We're in lesson 5, remain faithful to your ideal. And this is part 2. So we're going to jump right in here, and we're going to continue with what Neville is really illuminating for us, which is a little bit of a review happening here in lesson 5. Some of the previous ideas that have gone before, he's really emphasizing and kind of going over once again. It's the final lesson of the series, this lesson 5, and originally taught, in person with a small group of people. He's really kind of reviewing the most important points from what he's taught before, and also attempting to make it as practical as possible. So he starts by talking about this idea of lifting our perception to a higher dimensional realm where we can actually see and experience events in the 4D before they occur in the 3D. And what he starts by saying is, well, if this is possible, if we can do this, and of course the footnote here is, you can hear people say it's possible. You can hear Neville say it's possible. You can, listen to other people who have tried the practices and they can say it's possible. Footnote here is the only way you can really know for sure is to try it for yourself. Okay, that's the very, very important point here. But what he's saying is, if you can observe events in your imagination in this higher dimensional plane of perspective before they occur in time here in the 3D and become evident to the senses, then that means that really there is a field of all possible realities, and the part of the field of all possible realities that we experience in the 3D is determined by our connection to that higher dimensional plane of all possible realities. We're experiencing a slice in 3D, in time, of that which is the whole in 4D, outside or transcended beyond time. Okay? So he starts this really exploring this idea in detail with a Bible verse. And it's John 14:29, and he says, "And now I have told you before it came to pass, that when it is come to pass, you might believe." I told you before it came to pass in the 3D, so that when it does come to pass in the 3D, you might believe. Okay? So Neville says, many persons, myself included, have observed events before they occurred. That is, before they occurred in this world of 3 dimensions. Since we can observe an event before it occurs in the 3 dimensions of space, then that must mean that life on Earth proceeds according to a plan. And this plan must exist elsewhere in another dimension and must be slowly moving through our space here in the 3D. If the events that occur were not in this world when we observed them, meaning if we went into our imagination and we experienced an event in our imagination outside of time, outside of the 3D, meaning it hasn't arrived in the evidence of the senses. We didn't experience it with the physical senses. We experienced it with the imaginal senses. If those events occurred and we observed them before they happened in the 3D, then we can logically assume that those events were out of this world, meaning on a higher dimensional plane, higher dimensional realm. We went somewhere. We experienced a reality that is not this reality. So it must be outside of this reality in some way. And so Neville's point here, he says, whatever is there to be seen before it occurs here must be predetermined from the point of view of man awake in a 3-dimensional world. The ancient teachers taught us that we could alter the future. And my own experience confirms the truth of their teaching. So Neville says, my objective in giving this course is to indicate possibilities inherent in all of us, to show that we can alter our future. And then, once we have altered our future, that future then forms again in what Neville refers to as a deterministic sequence, starting from that point of interference, a future that will be consistent with the alteration. Okay, it's a little bit of an abstract idea. We can kind of acknowledge that this is a little bit out there. I mean, he's talking about it being out of this world. Okay, so there's a little bit of an abstract idea here, but we talk about it in this space because we are actively seeking to develop the language of higher dimensional thinking, meaning that even though initially to our cognitive faculties, this may seem a little abstract and maybe a little bit hard to really comprehend, by practicing talking about it, by practicing attempting to understand it intellectually, and then practicing these ideas as taught by Neville Goddard so that they leave the realm of just the merely intellectual and become experiential, we're actually developing our connection and our relationship to these additional sensory perceptive abilities that is inherent in every human being. This is something that is built in, but we have to activate our access to it by having conversations like this and by actively seeking to understand it and then actively seeking to experience it for ourselves. Okay? So what Neville says, he says, the most remarkable feature of the future is its flexibility, meaning that we have the opportunity to really choose our trajectory through this world of 3D form, particularly when we understand what this world of 3D is an offspring of. Okay, so there's something that is giving birth to, there's something that is kind of the source of, that is generating the world of the 3D that we're experiencing with the senses. And so when we begin to understand that, and then we understand that whatever that source of this world that we're perceiving with our senses, whatever that source is, it's flexible. We can actually influence, change, shape, carve our experience in the 3D by learning to access higher dimensional realms of perception using our imagination. And that's the source of this idea. Imagination creates reality. There's a realm of imagination that is outside of time, that is above the dark environment of the senses, that actually contains all possible realities. And we can learn to visit that space using our imaginative faculties and to select an event to experience there. This is similar to, we can use the analogy of accessing the source code of reality and writing into the source code a specific event. Use another analogy. We can say that what we're experiencing here in the 3D is a grand drama, a play, acted out on the stage of the world. And so we are characters. Each of us are our own central character. And then everyone around us are actors playing a part in the drama that is our lives on the stage that is the 3D world. Okay, so continuing with this analogy, now we're learning to become authors of the drama that we're experiencing on the stage of the world. All the world's a stage and all the players merely actors, right? All the people peopling our world are actors playing a part. And so once we start to tune into this idea, we can actually access the script. We can access the drama. We can access, the screenplay using our imagination, which from the perspective of the character would be outside of time, right? The script would exist outside of time. You could stand back if you were going to play a part in a stage play. You could read the script and you could see the beginning, the middle, and the end of the drama. So you, in that in that embodiment of standing outside of time and reading the whole script, you would be in the 4D compared to a character who is actively living through the script and acting it out one scene after another sequentially in time. By being able to stand outside of the drama and read the whole script from beginning to end, you are in relationship to the character outside of time. Okay? So we're learning to think this way. We're learning to be both the character in the drama and also to step off stage or backstage and look at the script, look at the screenplay, and see the past of the character that we're playing, the present of the character that we're playing, and the future of the character that we're playing, and also to write new movements in that play, new scenes, new acts in that play from the perspective of being the author, backstage, outside of time, seeing the whole drama laid out from beginning to end. Whole drama, we're outside, we have this higher, vaster perspective, and then we can make changes. And the way that we make changes, because remember, this drama, he says the most remarkable feature of the future is its flexibility. So this drama, it's unfolding in real time, and also it's flexible. It has an indeterminate end. So we can actually go to the desk of the author, sit down, look at it, and then choose the modifications to make. And then the way that we add them to the screenplay of our lives is by giving them vivid sensory detail in our imagination, choosing a new scene for our character to experience, and then imagining it in vivid detail. That's akin to writing that scene into the drama. And then when we leave that meditative, contemplative state where we're in imagination doing this, when we come back into our bodies, in our sensory world, now we know that our play, our drama, our screenplay of our life has been altered in some way. And now we get to act out in the flesh according to the script that was written in imagination. Okay? Neville continues. He says, this future, although prepared in advance in every detail, it does have several outcomes. And we have at every moment of our lives a choice before us, which of several futures we will have or experience. He continues. He says, there are actually two outlooks on the world possessed by everyone: natural focus and a spiritual focus. Okay, so the natural focus is the character living inside, on stage, inside the drama, inside the screenplay, unaware of being the author, potentially. We can learn to be aware of being the author and also the character, but a lot of us start out just simply being aware of being the character. Okay, that's the natural focus. Ancient teachers also called this the carnal mind because it's the one dominated by the evidence of the senses. It's, whatever we can feel or see, touch, hear, that seems to be what is most real, most present. It's the carnal mind, okay? And then there's also the spiritual focus, the mind of Christ, the mind of the author, the mind or perspective that transcends the evidence of the senses, leaves the stage altogether, and exists in the realm beyond, the realm of the author, the realm of the one writing the script, the one creating and crafting the scenes. Now, Neville says we can also differentiate these two states by designating one as being ordinary waking consciousness, which is just simply the state of being, present in the senses and living in the 3D world, and a controlled imagination governed by desire. So that process of accessing the script, accessing the screenplay from outside of time, that access to being able to do that is through a controlled imagination governed by desire. This is how we take this very abstract concept of how to exist and operate outside of time, and we make it very practical. It's like, why would I want to learn how to do this? Well, because this is how we can take our desires and write them into the script so that now we can take control of this character and begin to move them down a bridge of incidents to experience our best life, which is really what we're all here to do. Neville continues. We recognize also these two distinct centers of thought in this statement. The natural man receiveth not the things of the Spirit of God, for they are foolishness unto him. Neither can he know them, because they are spiritually discerned. Now, that's a quote from 1 Corinthians 2:14. Okay, so the natural man, the one who is fully plugged into the evidence of the senses and unaware of the nature of reality, hasn't asked the big questions yet. Okay, if you were to come and start to speak about, being the author, about accessing outside of time and space, a dimensionally greater field of reality where the future can be selected, okay, the natural man doesn't really have ears to hear that, doesn't really have a context for how to accept that. This is why, this Bible verse says it would be foolishness to the natural man. These ideas are spiritually discerned, right? Because they're above and beyond the realm of the senses. They are spiritual in nature. They are accessed through the imagination, which by very definition is spiritual. Neville says the natural view takes all of reality and confines it to a single moment called now. To the natural view, there is no past, it's merely imaginary. There really is no future, it's merely imaginary. There's really only what I can sense using my 5 natural senses in the here and now. That's what appears to be real. And anything outside of that appears to be unreal or foolishness to the natural mind. The spiritual view, the view in imagination, when we learn to control our imagination to access this realm of thinking, the spiritual view sees the contents of time, right? Because, he's saying sees the contents of time. I really like this analogy of being able to actually look at the whole script of the drama, the whole screenplay from beginning to end, the whole play that will be acted out. You can see ahead of time from outside. So you could say that you're seeing the contents of time. If you're able to look at the script or, of the movie, of the drama, of the play ahead of time, you are outside of time and you are seeing the contents of time, because this drama that you're holding, this play, this screenplay, the script unfolds when played out scene by scene. It unfolds in time. So this is the contents of time, but you're able to hold it as one present whole. You're holding that script in your hands, and you're able to hold the whole of the contents of time in your hands. And so this is the spiritual view. The past and the future are a present whole to the spiritual view, which is holding the script in our hands. What is mental and subjective to the natural man is concrete and objective to the spiritual man. Okay, so mental and subjective is being inside the world and only being able to see and experience what your senses are telling you. Okay, so that's mental and subjective. Spiritual man holding the whole drama in the hands outside of time. It's concrete and objective. It's right here. I can hold it in my hands. I can see past, present, the future, scene by scene, line by line, action by action, event by event. I can see the whole thing from outside of time. So what is really the difference here? Okay. Neville seems to constantly come back to this idea, and the idea is habit. Okay. So we have a habit quite naturally, I would say. We're kind of conditioned into this habit. We have a habit of viewing things through the natural mind. For a lot of us, that is literally the natural way to view things. And this is why it represents, in most dramatic language possible, a second birth, okay? Because like if the first birth is coming into the world and this is the 3D and it's all that's real, a very dramatic way of saying this is that a second birth is actually learning that this world is the offspring of a dimensionally greater world, okay? So the Bible really takes it very dramatic language and says it's actually a whole second emergence within your being, which is this imaginal awakening where you start to become aware the phenomena of your life is not all that is. Like, this drama is not all there is. There's actually a dimensionally greater realm that can be accessed using our imagination. Okay, so the difference is habit. So we start off potentially with the habit of viewing what's around us as being real. And then over time, we can actually begin to shift that habit to also begin to incorporate this dimensionally greater or expanded way of thinking. So in Neville's words, he says, the habit of seeing only what our senses permit renders us blind to what otherwise we could see. Okay, so I like to look at this idea. We're going to take this one sentence and break it down. The habit of seeing only what our senses permit renders us blind to what otherwise we could see. Okay, so I'm going to offer an analogy, a metaphor, like kind of a different way of looking at this sentence. Okay, so we have an energetic operating system. Okay, so we have an electric function to our bioenergy. Okay, so we are electric beings. We have electric impulses that carry sensory impressions to our brain, and then we have a brain that operates on energetic electric impulses that is processing, the inputs of our senses. So when I'm touching my finger, I'm not actually sensing the actual touch. I'm actually sensing a derivative of the actual touch, which is an electrical signal that is being sent from the nerves in my finger up to my brain, and then is processed through the functions of my brain and registered in my conscious awareness as touch. Okay, so let's think of that process as being an energetic overhead. Okay, so if we have, let's say, all of our energy in our body, that's 100% of our energy. Okay, so all of our energy body, 100%. Okay, when we are fully in the now, fully in the present, fully in our senses, okay, and we are touching something, we're hearing something, we're seeing something, and all of our energetic attention is plugged into our senses, we could say that that's running, say, an 80% load on our energetic system. So 80% of our electricity moving through our body is focused on these sensory impressions and the sending of these electrical impulses from our nerves, from our hearing, from the wavelengths of light that our eyes are seeing, and then the energy is processing that, making it images, and then interpreting what those images must mean. So the brain is doing its process, the fingers, the nerves, what we're hearing, maybe we have olfactory, maybe we're smelling something, right? So we could say it's like an 80% load on our energetic system. Okay, so it's processing all of that. Here's the point that Neville's making. When we're running an 80% or higher load on our energetic system, because we're so completely focused on the 3D sensory world around us, okay, that energetic overhead, all that energy is being plugged into the senses, and it's leaving very little energy left over for us to access higher dimensional realms of awareness. And this is why he says, seeing only what our senses permit renders us blind to what otherwise we could see. Okay, so an example of this is if we were to begin to build a habit of withdrawing our attention from the realm of the senses, if we were able to take that 80% or higher load on our energetic system, and this is just a metaphor, right? So like, just understand this is a teaching tool. I'm not saying this is literally the percentages, right? This is just a way of relating to the idea. If we were able to, let's say, close our eyes, okay? So immediately closing my eyes, now I'm no longer spending that energy or using that energy. Maybe I've lowered my energetic overhead by, let's say, 20%. So now instead of an 80% load on my system, close my eyes. Let's say I'm now down to 60%. Okay. Now let's say that I, put in earplugs, noise canceling headphones. Okay. I'm no longer getting input from my ears. Now maybe I've lowered it to 40%. Okay. Now let's say that I lay down on a bed or a couch and I get super comfortable and I'm not actively touching anything. I'm just relaxed and I begin to withdraw my awareness from my physical body and move it into my imagination. Maybe I can get that sensory energy load on my system down to say 10% or less. Okay. Now I have 90% of my energy available to perceive what other information might be available to me when my energy is not focused on processing the 3D. Okay. So, what this does is this breaks open a possibility of redirecting that energetic overhead to processing other sources of information. And of course, in this case, in this school, we're talking about accessing the realm of imagination. Okay, so this is exactly why Neville teaches the process that he does. He doesn't describe it the way that I just did, but again, our goal here is to expand and kind of break it apart so we can understand it better. So this is why he talks about laying back on a bed, on a couch. I'm sleepy, very, very sleepy, really getting all the way down so that your energetic overhead is decreasing from 80, 90% in the senses to maybe 10% in the senses. You just kind of have like a basic, your body's more or less asleep, but your mind is still aware. Maybe you're 10% or less in the senses. And now you have freed up 90% of your energy to focus on accessing a dimensionally greater realm of awareness. Okay, now this is a breakthrough because it allows us to actually penetrate the dark environment of the senses and see the world of light, which is the world of imagination. Okay, so the whole point here is to begin to reduce or change or shift the habit of always being 80, 90% of our energetic overhead in the senses and begin to make a habit of routinely dropping that percentage down to 10% or less and using that freed up energy to focus on other realms of perception. Okay? The way Neville says this, he says we must cultivate the faculty of seeing the invisible. We should often deliberately disentangle our minds from the evidence of the senses and focus our attention on an invisible state, mentally feeling it and sensing it until it has all of the distinctness of reality. So that's taking this energy that we freed up by deliberately disentangling our minds from the evidence of the senses. And we're now redirecting that energy into the imagination, a disciplined, controlled imagination. And now we're using that energy to create a scene with distinctness, with vividness. He says you must mentally feel it and sense it until it has all of the distinctness of reality. And this is a practice. It's a practice to learn to control your attention in this way, to learn to adjust kind of that budget of your bioenergy and refocus it into other realms of awareness. This can take practice, okay? Neville describes this as earnest, concentrated thought. Earnest, concentrated thought, really developing and cultivating focus, controlled imagination, a controlled focus on a specific scene in imagination, having removed your energy from the senses and then refocusing it in a dimensionally greater plane. He says, earnest, concentrated thought, focused in this way, shuts out the other sensations and causes them to disappear. We must and have only to concentrate on the state desired in order to see it. He says the habit of withdrawing our attention from the region of sensation and concentrating it on the invisible develops our spiritual outlook. It enables us to penetrate beyond the world of sense and to see that which is in the 3D invisible. Okay, going back to our analogy of being the actor in a drama and also being the author of the drama. Okay, When we are in the drama, we can't see the next page of the script. Okay. We're only in this moment. The next page of the script is kind of a mystery. We can have intentions for it. We can have, oh, I think what's going to happen next is X, Y, and Z because I've made a plan for it in the 3D. Okay. But really, we could say it's invisible to us. Okay. We haven't experienced it in the senses yet. It's invisible. It's around that corner of perception. Can't quite see. It's over the horizon. Okay. But when we withdraw our attention from the region of sensation and we concentrate on the invisible, that's the same as stepping out of the role of the actor and going backstage and looking at the script, opening it up. Okay, in the drama, I'm here. Let me turn over the page. Let's see what happens next. Okay, it's the being able to penetrate the world of sense and see outside of time. And that's also what, in biblical language, they would say is calling things that are unseen as though they were seen. Okay, so let's take this analogy of the drama and the screenplay and the author and the character a little bit further. If you were the character and you were on stage and you were speaking to another character who had not seen the script, okay, and you started to tell that character, because you had seen the script, hey, other character on this grand, stage of the world, so let me tell you what happens next, okay? If you did that and you told this other character who hadn't seen the script, hey, next up in the script, this person's going to come in and they're going to say X, Y, and Z, and then we're all going to leave and go do this, okay? To that person, you would be prophesying or calling things that were unseen as though they were. You're saying that, you've seen that this event is going to happen, but it hasn't actually happened. So it's unseen, it's invisible, but you're talking about it as though it is visible, okay? To that other character, that might seem a little strange. But if you've seen the script, if you've accessed a dimensionally greater realm of awareness, if we're going to use, metaphysical terms, or simply gone backstage and read the script, okay, to you, that's really not strange at all. You're calling things unseen to the other characters as though they were seen, but to you, they were seen because you've read the script. Okay. Now, reading the script also implies being able to write the script. Okay. So I keep referring to it as reading the script, but really there's a state of authorship here where we're actually also authoring the script. So we're all three. We're both the author of the script. We can read the script, and then we also experience the script when we come back out of the 4D, out of our imagination, and we plug back into the physical body and continue on the stage, the play of our lives, play of, the stage of the world. See that which is invisible. Okay, so this is a statement from Romans 1:20. The verse goes like this: for the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen. Okay, so for the person who's developed this higher dimensional realm of awareness, it may be invisible to everybody else, but to us, we've clearly seen it. This vision is completely independent of the natural faculties, meaning, maybe there's a character in this world who is physically blind, okay? Does not affect the realm of imagination. The realm of imagination, one can still perceive and see, okay? So it doesn't depend on the natural faculties. It's above and beyond the natural faculties. And Neville says you must open this and quicken it, meaning open your realm, first of all, of consciousness and awareness to the fact that this realm does exist, and then quicken it, meaning begin to practice accessing it, begin to make it more accessible through practice, through consistent, redirecting of your bioenergy by withdrawing from the region of the senses and investing into this higher dimensional plane of awareness. He continues, Neville says, a little practice will convince us that we can, by controlling our imagination, reshape our future in harmony with our desire. Okay, so we're on the world stage, we're characters in a drama, we're living our lives. And then we learn that by controlling our imagination, we can actually access the role of being the author and then reshape the future of the character by writing in a new scene that implies that the character is now experiencing our desire. We as the character are now experiencing our desire. And the way that we know that is because we have now written into the screenplay a scene that would imply that that is true. This is really engineering reality at a very high level. Neville says, desire is the mainspring of action, meaning that we have to really want something, and it has to be like a true desire. We have to be motivated. It has to be something, the mainspring of action. It has to like really light us up in a way where we are compelled to act. We have to want something and be so aware of the desire that we are then motivated to go into imagination and create the experience of it. Okay, so, as the author, we have to be, kind of watching ourselves play out the drama of our lives. And then as the author saying, what would be really cool is if this character, moved in this direction and had these experiences, right? But it has to be like wow, this would be really, meaningful, really fulfilling. There has to be a desire behind it, not just, a fleeting, fanciful thinking. It has to be like yes, I feel so inspired by this idea that I'm actually going to reshape my screenplay of my life to now include a scene that implies that this is now real for this character that I'm playing. Neville says, desire is the foundation of this whole reality. The whole reason why we're even in a reality like this is because we desired to experience our greater selves in this way. We had a compelling desire to experience ourselves, the one thing that we all are, in this unique way, in a 3D reality. And that's what caused us to give birth to this world in this way, and then to come in and inhabit characters on this vast stage of the world. Neville says we couldn't move a single finger unless we had the desire to move it. No matter what we do, we follow the desire which at the moment dominates our minds. When we break a habit, it is only because our desire to break the habit is greater than our desire to continue the habit. The desires which impel us to action are those which hold our attention. A desire is but an awareness of something that we lack and need in order to make our life more enjoyable. Again, the whole point of talking about this is to make it very practical. How do we improve our quality of lives? By being aware, by being cognizant, by practicing, with this faculty that we all have to create our best lives using a controlled imagination. Neville says, desire always has some form of personal gain in view, and the greater the anticipated gain, the more intense the desire. And he says there is no unselfish desire. Even our desire for another is in some way, according to him, truly selfish, meaning that, it is still roots out of self. Even if it's for another, it's because we have a desire to see them in a better place. Okay, so we can own that as still being a selfish desire, even if it is, truly well-meaning. So we can take any negative connotation of the idea of a selfishness to our desire. We can remove a negative connotation. We can say all desire is selfish in some way. Now we can still attune our desire to that which is lovely, of course. That's incumbent in this conversation is, the net result of learning to think this way is to focus on the lovely, because ultimately we understand that that's the most important thing. Neville says, where there is nothing to gain, there is no desire. And consequently, there is no action, because desire is, of course, the mainspring of action. The spiritual man speaks to the natural man through the language of desire. The key to progress in life and to the fulfillment of dreams is in ready obedience to the voice of desire. Unhesitating obedience to its voice is an immediate assumption of the wish fulfilled. To desire a state is to have it. Okay, so desire we can change and modify and upgrade our definition of the word desire from becoming aware of something that we lack to becoming aware of something that we have. Okay, so before we desired it, we probably weren't really thinking about it at all. The fact that we now move into a place where we feel a desire for it means that our awareness is now upgraded to now include that. Okay, so it's actually desire is actually a having rather than a not having. Okay, so there's a little bit of a mental switch that we flip there, and we look at it not as becoming aware of the absence of a thing, but rather becoming aware of the thing altogether and now choosing to include it in our experience. That's ready obedience to its voice. Ready obedience to the voice of desire is saying, oh, I become aware of this thing. Let me now include that in my mood. Immediately assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, meaning I now see it as now, okay, that's now a part. This desire is now a part of my state because I just became aware of it and I have now added it to my state. Pascal has said, you would not have sought me had you not already found me. Okay, so you would not have wanted this thing if you were not already, in a dimensionally greater aspect of yourself, this thing. By assuming the feeling of our wish fulfilled and then living and acting on this conviction. Okay, so it's this feeling of the wish fulfilled, it's a conviction. Okay, so it actually dominates our experience. It's a conviction, it's convicting in that way. It's a very powerful word that he chose to use here, describing the feeling of the wish fulfilled and assuming it's a conviction. And because it becomes a part of our state, we now are altering the future in harmony with our assumption, with our conviction of this feeling of the wish fulfilled. We assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and by assuming, we awaken. Assumptions awaken what they affirm. Okay, so if I assume that my interaction with you is going to be lovely, my assumption of that about you awakens a state of loveliness in you. It awakens it. It starts to flow energy into it. I start to, through my perception of you, through my assumption about you, I start to awaken that state in you. And, this is really a secret about relationships. What you assume to be true about another begins to awaken in them. And obviously it can take some time, to really get out of the grogginess of sleep and like really wake up and really come to the forefront of their expression. But just simply making that assumption about them begins to awaken it. And this goes for any type of assumption. You can assume the lovely about someone. You can also assume the unlovely about someone. Either way, your assumption begins to awaken what it affirms in that other. And why is this the case? Well, because we're the authors of the screenplay. So if we, as the authors, are making assumptions that a certain character is nefarious, that character is going to start to become nefarious. Our assumption is going to awaken that aspect of that character in our drama. Okay. Same thing about lovely. If we assume that, another character on the stage is going to be a lovely character in the drama, our assumption as the author begins to write the character in that direction. As soon as we assume the feeling that our wish is fulfilled, our fourth dimensional self, the author, begins to find ways for the attainment of this end and discovers methods for its realization. I've had the pleasure over the years of meeting several authors of fiction, of novels. And what's interesting about, sitting with authors, they tend to be very interesting people in general. They're kind of their own vibe, people who write novels. And what's interesting is a lot of times, they have an idea of a story in mind and they have an idea of the characters, but a lot of times as they're writing, they don't see the whole story. They're really just playing with a mood and a feeling, and they're actually experiencing the creation of the story as they're writing, which can be a very fascinating and intriguing process for the author. Remember one time I was sitting in a cafe and I was doing some work, and there was someone sitting next to me and we struck up a conversation and I found out they were working on their novel. And so this person was giving me just a little explanation. I was like, oh, it's a novel about, oh, it's these, two characters and like this and that happens. And I know that like, it was kind of a mystery novel. Like, I know that like ultimately, this other person like did it, right? It's a mystery. They did it, but I don't actually know how it's found out that they did it. And I don't actually know like the way that they did it, or ultimately like how the story will get from where the characters are now to where that's revealed. So in this case, the author was saying, well, I've seen the end, but I don't actually know the bridge. And that's a perfect metaphor for what we experience here as creators. There is an aspect of our being. It's usually not conscious, but there is an aspect of our greater being that is creating really out of thin air, in the same way that the author has seen the end and then is just writing and then kind of discovering as they're writing. There's an aspect of us that has seen the end because we've used a controlled imagination to picture it very clearly. And then we're just navigating a bridge and becoming aware of the story as it is written, meaning that dimensionally larger self is constructing with its larger outlook, the means, right? So we're discovering the story as it is written, but we've seen the end, okay? It's a clarification there. Now, Neville says, if your mind is undisciplined, I think all of us can relate to this because it's a practice. We're learning to discipline our minds. If our mind is undisciplined, we can find it difficult to assume a state which is denied by the senses. But there is a technique, and this is the same technique we've talked about at length here in Sunday Mystery School, that makes it easy to call things which are not seen as though they were, meaning to encounter an event outside of time before it occurs within time. It is simple, and sometimes people have a habit of slighting what seems to be simple. Surely it's not that easy that I just have to go, into my imagination, withdraw my attention from my senses, and then create a scene, just simply through fanciful daydream, create a scene that implies that my wish is like, it can't be that easy. Yes, it is that easy. Easy is a relative term. You still have to go through the process. You still have to have clarity on your desire. You still have to create the scene and then learn to discipline your imagination long enough to experience the scene. But it is a simple idea. It is a simple idea. And we're told over and over again, we must become like children, right? So for a child, it's the easiest thing in the world to imagine that they're on the moon or that they're, flying a spaceship or whatever it is. It's just all of a sudden from one minute to the next, they've transported themselves from running around their backyard to being on a pirate ship, right? So it's like literally this instant thing. So it is simple, and we can be childlike in this way and do it with a little bit more intensive focus, right? We can bring aspects of our maturity to it, but at its source, it is a simple thing like that which a child would experience in imagination. This simple formula, Neville says, for changing the future was discovered after years of searching and experimenting. Okay, so we're going to run through these steps once again. We've talked about this at length. We're going to review it once again because I feel like we've kind of added some context, added some understanding as to why the steps are the way that they are. So we're going to review them again so that we have fresh inspiration as we end this to really go and practice for ourselves, to test it. Because like I said in that footnote at the beginning, you can hear me talk about it, you can hear Neville talk about it, you can hear other people talk about it. You're only ever going to know for yourself when you try it for yourself. Step one, you must have a desire. That's the mainspring of all action. You must know with a definiteness and a clarity exactly what you want. Step two, construct in your imagination just as though you were the author of a screenplay. What is an event that would happen to your character after this desire was fulfilled? An event which implies that the desire has been fulfilled. Okay, so it's like an event happens, and then the next thing that happens in the screenplay is this, which affirms, hey, this just happened. And the point of that scene is to tell the audience, hey, this just happened. It's now real in the life of this character. Okay, that's the event that you're constructing as the author for your character to experience. Now, this event must have first person, present tense action involved in it, meaning you can't just stay at the level of the author and watch the character go through it. You actually have to construct the event as the author and then plug yourself into the character and imagine that you're the character and then act out in the first person as the character that event. You have to make it sensory. So you have to use your imaginary senses and make it as realistic as possible and imagine as though you're rehearsing, the scene in imagination before you get on the stage and act it out in front of the audience. So step 1, clearly define what you want. Step 2, construct the event, the scene that would imply that you have what you want. Step 3, access the script, access the screenplay. Immobilize your physical body. Reduce the overhead of your senses from 80, 90% down to less than 10%. So you can free up all that additional energy to focus on your imagination. Induce a state akin to sleep. Imagine you are sleepy, lay down on a bed, relax in a chair. Close your eyes, put in noise-canceling headphones if that'll help you. Don't have to, maybe it'll help. Again, the whole point is to lower the overhead of your senses. Focus on the action you intend to experience in imagination, and then mentally feel yourself in, just like you're pretending, but you're doing it in imagination. Feel yourself into the action. Imagine that you are doing it in the here and now. Not in the future, not in the past. You're doing it right now. You're mentally rehearsing. You're doing it right now in your imagination. You're acting out this scene. You must participate in the action. Don't just stand back and be the observer. You must do it. Feel that you are actually doing it. Make the imaginary sensation real to you. The proposed action must follow the fulfillment of your desire. That's logical. That makes sense, right? And you must feel yourself into it until it has the vividness and distinctness of reality. Before we went live here on YouTube, I was in the Zoom room and I was speaking with one of the Mastermind members, and we were talking about how some of these ideas in the realm of metaphysics can kind of seem a little bit out there. But if we take these some of these ideas and we kind of add performance psychology words to them, all of a sudden it's in the realm of more normal thinking in society. Okay, so an example is, we're talking about, state akin to sleep, the hypnagogic state, going into a dimensionally greater plane and imagining things. Well, in academia and sports psychology, that's simply called mental rehearsal. Okay, so this is where, you're watching the Olympics and you're seeing, the swimmer, Michael Phelps. I remember seeing him doing this. He's about to swim. Years ago, he's about to swim his gold medal winning race. And what is he doing before he hops in the pool? He's sitting, his headphones on, eyes closed, and he's just sitting, waiting for his heat to be called, right? He's just sitting, eyes closed, earphones on. What do you think he's doing? Okay. He's mentally swimming the race and winning the race before he hops in the pool and swims and wins the race. Okay. He's doing the same thing, but it's, in the world of executive coaching, high performance executive coaching or sports psychology or education, they talk about it as mental rehearsal. Okay. It's a performance psychology term. Okay. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're mentally rehearsing the action. We are winning the race in our imagination before we even get in the pool and swim it. We are, celebrating the win of our promotion by shaking the hand of our boss before ever going into work and actually getting the promotion and shaking the hand of the boss. Okay, we're simply mentally rehearsing. Okay, so it's like you can go as abstract and as supernatural about this as you want, and you can also make it very simple and plain and look at the world of high-end sports psychology, and people are being taught to do this, and they do it in the same way. I mean, we see Michael Phelps, sitting right before his race, but also athletes talk about in their conditioning process ahead of time, they'll use float tanks, which are also known as sensory deprivation tanks. Okay, dark, silent, the water's body temperatures. There's no, we went from 80, 90% being in the senses to being probably less than 3% in the senses, because you literally get no physical sensation because you're in body temperature water, floating, you're weightless, okay? And you can't hear anything. You're in a insulated float tank. It's completely 100% dark. And so now your amount of energy available to focus on imaginal scene, and I've floated, so I can speak from experience. It goes from, being 90% in the senses to being probably like 3% or less in the senses. And in some cases, I've been able to come completely out of body. My awareness is completely, so I'm 0% in the senses. And now all of that energy is freed up to focus on creating the scene or experiencing the scene or rehearsing the scene. Okay, so this is something that high-end athletes are doing as a normal course of their training. Okay, so this is we're not making up anything new here. This is something that has been very researched and is being applied anywhere where people are talking about being high performing in life. This is being applied. Okay, so this is just something that we're taking, and Neville obviously talks about it in a little bit different terms. We mystery school, we tend to talk about it in more mystery school or metaphysical terms, but it also translates to perhaps more mainstream performance psychology, sports psychology. Okay, that's exactly what Neville gets into, this idea of experiencing ahead of time by mentally rehearsing. He says, say you want a promotion. Well, you go through this process and you experience the scene that would imply you've been promoted. You mentally rehearse that scene, whatever would follow the promotion. You feel that you've just been promoted, and then you act out a scene that is a mental rehearsal of the scene that would naturally follow this becoming true, becoming evident by your senses in your actual 3D world. Okay. You could visualize a friend standing before you, or your boss, or whoever would shake your hand, and then feel their hand in your hand, shake their hand. It should feel sensory and vivid, as though it's actually happening. Just like Michael Phelps feels himself in the water and feels the rhythm of the breathing and the swimming, and then feels himself, in that state, getting to the end and looking up at the clock and seeing he just set a world record. All of that is part of the imaginal scene before he gets in the pool and swims it. Okay, so we're doing the same thing. We're literally going through the process, feeling the evidence of the senses in our imagination that is implying the outcome that we desire. You must make then, now, and somewhere else here. Okay, so this is a full transport of your awareness. Again, you're outside of time. So you're actually placing yourself in that scene, which will come later in the realm of time, but you're placing yourself there now. And he emphasizes again and again, you must feel yourself in action here and now. Michael Phelps is not imagining watching himself on TV swimming. He's actually in the water swimming in his imagination. It must be first person. And Neville goes as far as to say the difference between seeing yourself as though you're acting it out from a third person and actually doing it yourself, that's the difference between success and failure. You must actually do it yourself. You must be first person, present tense, for this to work. He gives the example of climbing a ladder. This is a common thing that Neville talks about in his work because most of us know what it feels like to climb a ladder. So it's a good example of how to practice using your imagination to experience physically what you would experience were you actually climbing a ladder. In fact, he actually gives this as a good example exercise if you're just trying this for the first time. What is mental rehearsal all about and how does it manifest? Well, do this process. Get into that sleepy state and then just simply imagine yourself putting your hands on the rungs of the ladder and stepping up onto the ladder. And if you do it right, you will feel like you actually climbed a ladder. And then the way that this drama of 3D reality works is at some point in the near term, in your actual 3D waking life, you will find yourself climbing a ladder because you're going to act out again in the physical what you have imagined with sensory detail, the way that he's described here, what you've rehearsed in the higher dimensional plane. Couple more points here to make this very practical. You want to condense the idea into a single act. Okay, so it's literally just, coming back to the example of Michael Phelps, literally just swimming, touching the marker at the end, looking up, seeing the world record. Like it's just that. It's not going to the press conference after or popping champagne after or, hearing, like it's literally one act. The whole point is to like make it easy to focus all of our attention on one single act and do it over and over again, rehearse it over and over again until it feels completely natural, until it feels real. Otherwise, our attention is like an untamed monkey and will climb all over, go all sorts of places. And before you know it, you will be at a very distant, off on some sort of associational track. You don't want to do that. You want to discipline your imagination, remain focused. Okay. He goes on to explain that drowsiness, this state of relaxation helps us do this. But I think we understand this because of what we've talked about, kind of reallocating our energetic budget away from the senses and putting it into that imaginal scene creation. And then, of course, he says the most effective way to embody a desire is to really become grateful for it. Repeat to yourself a short phrase such as, thank you, thank you, thank you, feeling really that you've received it and you're grateful. Gratitude is the state of receiving. It's very natural when someone gives you some sort of gift to feel grateful for it. So it's like those two ideas go hand in hand. Gratitude is the state of receiving. So simply getting into a feeling of gratitude, imagining the scene, and then feeling grateful for it. Thank you, thank you, thank you, as though you are thanking the author for having written this scene for you to experience. And then Neville, as usual, emphasizes that if we're able to fall asleep, actually fall asleep while we're doing this, that can create an experience of projection. As a brief example, I was touring my dream home in my imagination, and I happened to fall asleep as I was walking through the big room of my dream home, and immediately the transition went from mind awake, body asleep. I'm in my dream home in my imagination, and then I immediately walked into a dream where I was literally now asleep, but I was in a dream and I was still in that house, which was a lot of fun, by the way, to be able to explore it in a lucid dreaming state in that way. And so Neville talks about this being possible. And he says, if you want to experience it that way, you really need to stay in that scene all the way up until you actually fall asleep. Experiencing in imagination with all of the distinctness of reality, what would be experienced in the flesh if we had achieved our goal. And then he says the way that this is why it's the mystery school, right? Like it's a mystery how this happens. We're beginning to understand it a little bit better by practicing it. And of course, our science is working very diligently to try to explain in scientific terms how consciousness works, even what consciousness is, how it works, and how reality is created. But really, the whole idea here is that when we do this, we will, back inside the realm of time, meet this event in the flesh, just as we met it outside of time in the realm of imagination. And he says you must feed your mind with premises, meaning you must really remind yourself over and over again that when you presume this to be true, your assumptions, even though according to the evidence of the senses initially are false, okay? If you persist in your assumptions, you awaken them. You persist in them and you awaken them until they have all of the feeling of reality, and then they actually become reality. They become part of your screenplay, part of your drama that's being acted out. All the world's a stage, and all the people merely characters and players upon the stage. So you actually, through your assumptions, create that scene, and then it becomes a part of the drama of your life. Okay, so that is the end of the text for today for lesson 5, part 2. And a lot of it was review, but I feel like we were able to expand upon it by really focusing on developing some context for how to relate to these ideas, also bringing in and tying in the ideas of mental rehearsal, sports psychology, high performance thinking, some mindset things, and then also really building some metaphors by kind of understanding our bioenergy, and then why removing our attention from the realm of the senses frees up energy to discipline and focus our imagination in higher realms and perceive things using other imaginal senses that is not just our physical 3D senses. So I trust that this was illuminating as well by kind of breaking it down and going deeper into it. At this point, I'd like to invite anyone who is in the Zoom room who has comments or questions or just really anything to contribute. You may do so now. Hey, Orlena, nice to see you.
Yes, so happy to be here as usual. Okay,
Yes.
I have a story because I want to understand it. Okay,
Yeah.
especially as you know what you were saying. Okay, so there is a um, a program called Stage Academy, and I wanted the program. Okay, and so it was having a sale for 6 days, and I missed it. Okay, and so in my mind, I had the desire, right? That's the first step, that I wanted the program, but all the other steps that you mentioned, I didn't even do. But then guess what happened? I ended up getting a email saying that, one more time, you know what I mean?
Yep.
That that the sale is on again,
Yes.
and I ended up getting it. So like I knew that I wanted the program, okay? But like all the other steps, like I said, I didn't do, but I ended up getting the program at the price I wanted because
Yes.
the price is like like it's $1,000,
Yeah.
but I got it for $269, and that's what I paid attention to, right? But I
Yes.
didn't do any of the other stuff. So how do
Yes.
you explain that?
So, Orlena, because you've been so dedicated to
Okay,
this process, you have awakened your imagination. Okay.
okay,
And
okay,
here in Mystery School, we go to really extensive lengths because this is a master class. So we're
yeah,
all about like really going through these are the steps. And we have like this procedure that comes from Neville's teachings that is very
mhm,
like, formula. It's step one, step two, step three, right? But the whole point is to awaken the imagination so that we are now operating in both awarenesses simultaneously, the natural mind and the spiritual mind. And when our
okay,
imagination becomes awakened this way, we learn to immediately accept our desires and
okay,
accept them, right? Accept that, oh, well, I have a desire to take this and I want to take it at this price. Let me just go ahead and accept that that's now.
right.
And so that's why for you, you didn't have to, lay back on your bed, right? You just were like, boom, I'm awake. I know who I am. If I want that, then I've got it.
Right.
And so that's
Okay.
like the natural progression. You're an example of someone who has really internalized this knowledge and are
Yes.
now, you're just awake and able to accept your desire instantly.
Yes.
That's the goal. And I think over time, yes, we have this very formulaic approach and it can be used. And I do think it's important to practice because this awakens other faculties over
Yes.
time.
Okay.
Really, the whole goal is to get to the level where we just instantly assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. Oh, I have this desire. Well, that must mean this is now part of my life.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Awesome. That's so
Great
great.
job. Yeah. So glad you got your academy access at
Yes,
exactly the price
exactly.
desired.
At the price point I wanted and everything. It
Yes.
helps you with your communication. So yeah, I'm just trying to work on
Fantastic.
that.
Awesome. An admirable goal. Yes. Beautiful. Thank you for that contribution, Orlena. Who else do we have in the Zoom room? Anyone else like to comment or contribute? Either stories. Okay. I hope that was
Josiah,
helpful.
it's Andrea.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrea.
I usually just like to talk about what was presented to me in a
Yes.
new and exciting and fresh way. And today it was the canceling out up to 90% of the five senses of the third dimension. And that gives you 90% to create as the author of the
Yes.
story.
Yes.
And, I've always started meditation with lying quietly and, trying to block out things, but I never thought about it in that sense, that when you block all that out, now you have all that to go into the fourth dimension and create. And that, I
Yes.
think knowing that alone is just going to blow up my meditation practice. So thank you for that.
Awesome, Andrea. And I'm glad that you pointed that out. That was the goal of really trying to expand it in that way and give like another context for it. Also, I feel inspired to share too that there was this man that I was watching on a series on Gaia that channels, and he was talking about how when he first made contact with this other part of the one thing that we all are. I don't think it's really that crazy to consider there's other beings in other dimensions that we can have conversations with. When he's really learning to like have interactions and like kind of like learning to let that being speak in the 3D through him, he was talking about how one of the first things that he was taught to do was just to sit quietly and close his eyes. And so he said, like, when he first started to like unlock this ability, he would just throughout the day, he would really practice just like sitting quietly and closing his eyes. And he said, just simply by closing his eyes, he noticed that the amount of energy that was normally processing visual information was freed up. And he started to be able to perceive other layers of reality, just coexisting that are here all the time. But when all of our energy is focused in the 3D, it's hard to perceive them because we don't really have a lot of overhead left over. So he was talking about, he's like, hey, this is just something I've started to do. And I've noticed that it's begun to unlock my intuition, my ability to perceive, things, or even, some of these things that we consider superpowers like telepathy. I don't think that's so much of a superpower. I think it's all built in. But so many of us are so focused on the here and now that we're not really, tuning into our ability to hear the thoughts of others or communicate with others over what would seem to be vast distances in the 3D, right? So it's like literally by we're so conditioned, most of us from an early age, to focus on the 3D, but by simply beginning to kind of shift that allocation of our energetic budget, both for the purposes described so far here in this session, but also just like understanding that that's going to open up other dimensions of perception in general, that can be a really powerful upgrade, not just to our meditative practice, but also to our ability just to be perceptive. There's all kinds of information available to us all the time that a lot of us aren't even aware of. If we're too plugged into what is really the most immediate, right? The most carnal, which is just the five senses, right? So it's like we can kind of begin to dim the five senses, and then the sixth sense really lights up. And then obviously it frees up energy to go and do meditative practices and focus on other things as well. So thank you for that contribution, Andrea.
You're
Any
welcome. Thank
comments?
you. That was so awesome.
Awesome. Any other comments from the Zoom room?
Real quick question.
Yeah.
So with the quick manifestation that I did, I let it go. Did that have anything to do with, creating it? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
So a lot of times when we are holding on to something, we're
Mhm.
holding on to the lack of it. So it's like, oh, I really wanted that, which implies that we don't have it. Right?
Yeah.
What you
Okay.
did, I'm speaking kind of for you. Like what I
Mm.
see, what I from a third person see you having done is saying, oh, I want that, and I want it at this price. I see myself being a part of this. I've now accepted that this is the way it is, and then I'm just going to trust that it's going to happen
Right.
in that
Okay.
perfect way. Yeah.
Okay.
So in that case, you weren't holding on to the lack of it, which could have manifested as them not sending that next email.
Hmm.
Right? So yeah, you just accepted it, and then by letting it go, you created the natural space for it to come into your drama in the perfect way.
And that's how everything works, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah,
All
and
right.
then the
Awesome.
goal is just to get really good at doing that all the time. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. All right, so that wraps it up for Sunday Mystery School for today. We're going to continue next week with the next part of Lesson 5, continuing a little bit of the review and then also expanding some of these ideas, getting a little bit deeper into them than where we've been so far. It's been a pleasure having you all with me today. Thank you to the members in the Zoom room. Always nice to see you. And until next time, two things. First of all, practice. Practice with what we've been talking about here today. Practice with mental rehearsal. Practice with, as Andrea was pointing out, kind of this new understanding of our bioenergy and shifting our awareness, shifting what we're focused on, kind of freeing up energy that was previously invested in the senses and, investing it into the imaginal realm and creating pictures with it. Practice. And then also, of course, as always, imagine wisely. And I will see you all in the next.